We are live. It's day 7, the bonus story of the 12 days of birth stories. And I'm so excited to have Leah on with us. She is one of my favorite people, as I've been sharing with some of you. And she's going to give us some wisdom and walk us through some of her experiences, including a little bit of something that happened postpartum. So I'm really excited to chat with her. So let's try and bring her into the chat. Let's hope that it works. It has so far. Hello.
Hello.
Leah and I already saw each other today, so
We did. If I put my phone like that, can you still hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, perfect.
Does that work for you?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so do you want to introduce yourself? What
Sure.
you like? You can decide what you want to share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm definitely a different, I feel like I'm a different person from when I had both of my children, from my first birth to where I am now. I'm a single mom and I have 2 boys, and I feel like I was like thinking about this too before we joined. I was like, who am I? Like, I feel like my limbs and my feet are in like so many different worlds and spaces, and
Yeah.
some days I don't know who I am. So I'm a corporate person, but I'm also like in the natural space, and just trying to do my best in this, be a kind person in this earth. So
I feel
that's who I am.
like I feel like that is so common for so many women. Like we wear 17 hats, but also just the modern day woman just does a bunch of different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You have your foot in one world, you have your foot in another.
Yeah.
And that's super relatable.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah,
we've
I'm in my
done
40s. I'm like in a, also going into different chapter of my life with, my body and things that I'm letting go of, that didn't matter to me at 30, and they yeah. So I'm also entering like a different stage with my kids as well. I have a teenage, a preteen, and also a little one. So, and we'll probably get more into that too as I share about my birth, because there is an age gap, with
yeah, and
my kids.
I think you're one of the moms who doesn't have like a wee little one at home. I think we haven't had that yet.
Still
So
co-sleep.
you we still yes, you do. You know what I was thinking of this morning though?
Yeah.
I was like, I talk to people all the time about how, I can't, I couldn't really co-sleep with my babies. I don't know how people do that. My dogs fucking co-sleep with me. And I'm like, oh, the best. So I co-sleep with a different kind of creature.
Exactly.
Similar. Okay. So yeah, whose story do you want to share? Do you want to talk about the age gap? Because you have some other interesting parts of your story that with, a partner who wasn't even in the
Yeah.
country that
Yeah.
impact a lot. So
Yeah.
tell us about, where do you want to start?
Yeah. So maybe I'll just give some context about my first birth, but I think primarily I want to talk about my second, because my first didn't go as I had envisioned it would go. And through that experience and then having my second, I actually had to let go of a lot of expectations,
Okay.
and which helped me, I think, by letting go of those expectations, helped me really kind of lean into. I know birth can be like, it throws you curveballs and it doesn't always go, even if you let go of expectations, but
Yep.
that really helped me in my journey, to have the birth that I had like envisioned with my first. So I was actually able to kind of reclaim it 5 years later. And that was really healing as well.
Amazing. I love
Yeah.
it. Okay. So did you have, with your first, did you have a hospital birth?
Yeah. So with my first, I did have a hospital birth. My partner was living out of the country. I was living with my mother. Um, I had midwives and they were in Toronto, and I was living outside, just outside of Toronto. So I knew that there, there was a whole other dynamic with that would happen. But there's also some similarities too with my first and my second, even with letting go of expectations. So I labored alone for the most part with my first. My mom was there, but she wasn't like a support, I would say. She did the best she could, but she doesn't do well in these kinds of situations. You're seeing someone in pain and a discomfort. It's a different kind of pain though. Like, it's not like someone's doing something to you, right? This is part of the journey, to be in pain, to get a baby to go where it needs to go. But it was hard for her to see that and witness that. So I say I labored alone a lot, and I was in labor for, I think, 48 hours almost with my first, before going into the hospital. And because I didn't sleep for those 2 days, because it's the first time and you don't know what to expect, and you think it's going to go faster than it does, and then it doesn't. So I knew with my first that I wanted to, sorry, let me back up. I wanted to try to go as natural as I could with no interventions. I had actually, part of my journey before I even had children, I was considering going back to school to be a midwife, and I bought all the books to be a doula. So I'd already read all of them before having like probably 5 years before that.
So there's
Or a few.
a lot of prep, a lot of thought about pregnancy and birth and postpartum, and a lot of that like research and mind prep for what that could be like for somebody.
Yeah.
But have you ever experienced it? I think that's a good point. Like, you also get excited, right? Like, this is the day.
Yeah.
And so sleeping is hard because you're also really excited, and sometimes we're like fatigued from pregnancy and we want it to be over.
Well, I was actually supposed to have my car cleaned that day, that first birth, and I canceled it because I was like, I'm in labor. This is gonna happen. Like, I can't go do my appointment. In hindsight, I could have went and done it and had my car cleaned.
Leah, I feel like that is a pattern.
Maybe. But I had to like travel a little bit, and anyways, my mom was like, you shouldn't go, you're in labor, and la la la. I was like, oh my gosh. But
we can
I read,
normalize that too, right? Like, we can normalize that when you're in labor initially in the early stages, you can just live your life. Like, it doesn't happen for most people. It doesn't happen as quickly as even a day, so you can kind of go on living your life. Sometimes it's 2 days, sometimes it's weeks of on and off stuff.
Exactly.
So
I think I was 39 weeks, so I was like really close-ish. So and one of the books actually that I'd read, I think it's, I probably have the wrong name, but Ina May, is that? Yes.
Or Ina May,
yeah, that the May person. And that really helped me like set up what I wanted to, or envision what I wanted to do, and how I envisioned my birth would be. But like I said, with my first, it didn't go as planned. So anyways, fast forward, I ended up getting an epidural. I had my membranes ruptured. And then I wasn't even talking about my first birth, but here we go. But then I was like, okay, I'll just, I still don't want, I still refused the medication. Like, I still refused any medication, even with the rupture. But then it brought on, obviously, the contractions, like, even stronger. And then I came to a point where I was like, okay, once they check me the next time, I wasn't dilating. I was only like 2 centimeters dilated. And then after they ruptured them, I said, okay, I'll labor as long as I can. But I was getting exhausted. Because of that. And the baby, like, now in hindsight, he wasn't in my birth canal properly, so he wasn't actually putting pressure on my cervix to actually help me to dilate. So he was like sideways, so he wasn't coming into the birth canal. And so then what happened? So then I said, okay, the next time you check me, I had a number in my head. I was like, if I'm like 7 or 8 centimeters dilated, like, I can do this. Like, I can pull through and the baby and I can work together. But that didn't happen. I was only like 4, and it was like about midday that day, so I was already up for 2 full nights, and I was like, this is not progressing. Like I wanted to avoid having a C-section as much as I could at that point, because now I'm in the hospital, and who knows what can happen, when you're there. Also, the OB had come in a couple times to try to turn him, and he wasn't responding to any of that. So I said, epidural, let me get some sleep, let me get some rest. I'll restore my, I'll have some food and whatever. I don't even know if I could eat, but anyways, I said, let me just restore myself.
Recoup, reset.
Exactly. Yeah. So I did that, and at about 9:30, I was dilated and ready to push. So it actually, in hindsight, I'm glad I made that decision, and I tuned in, and I made all these decisions just because of the prep work I had done with understanding the medical interventions that they could in your body and all that. So so then I pushed for maybe a half an hour, and then he came earthside. So yeah. So avoided a C-section, and but had to really grieve a lot of what I had thought it would be. And yeah.
Do you think that doing that prep work and like being, because I feel like this is that a lot of women would resonate with, like being so excited about birth and thinking, oh, maybe I want to be a midwife or a doula. Do you think sometimes it does a disservice to the birthing experience, because you are kind of hoping for this like perfect, natural, birth, and then you kind of are grieving something that you kind of set yourself up for? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, for me, I felt like it prepared me to quit or pivot. I don't know what the right word is. Maybe not quit, but move into a different direction. Because I knew that I was running out of steam. Like I knew when I heard 4 centimeters, I was like, oh my God, no, I can't do it. I have to change my course. And I think that really helped with avoiding a C-section, because that's sometimes what happens. Like he still, even when I was pushing, he still turned his head, like as he was coming out, like they had to really help him like come out the way that he was supposed to come. He was still turning his head even to the end.
Yeah.
And if James, that kind of makes sense now.
Yes, I was just thinking about that.
I have to get a Kleenex. I'm sorry. Can I
go ahead. Yep, go ahead. He is, we've been talking about in these stories, like, does the birth reflect who the child has become and the things that they have encountered thus far? So her oldest is the same age as my oldest, so they are 12. And I would say actually both of their birth stories reflect things that who they are and things that they've been through. And James is a character, and maybe he was like a know-it-all in the birth canal.
He wasn't ready. He wasn't ready. If I like backed up to the 3 days before, I did too much. As you know, sometimes I do. I still do that.
What do you mean you did too much? Like,
so I had a midwife appointment. It was, I think, a Monday. It was a Monday. I had a midwife appointment. I had to go travel into Toronto from Georgetown, which is about an hour and 20 minutes, maybe with traffic, or maybe more with traffic. I had to go all the way. Yeah, so I had to go quite far, all the way downtown, like on the east side of Toronto. So I did that. I went to my midwife. Then I met a friend for lunch, which was in another area of Toronto. I had to drive like 45 minutes to go there. And then I went to meet another friend. And when I arrived to that friend's house, she wanted to go for a walk because she had a little one. So we went for a really long walk, and it was a really, really hot day. It was like July. It was July 23rd or something. So it was really, really hot that day, probably the hottest day of the summer. And I wasn't drinking enough water. I wasn't taking care of myself that way as much as I probably should have been. and I stayed at her house till probably about 7 to avoid the traffic to go back.
Yeah.
And I knew something. I knew something. So I stopped. I remember stopping at Starbucks to get like a tea, like a cold tea. And that morning I woke up and I was in labor. Like it was starting to be in labor. So he wasn't ready, but I put my body. I did way too much. I wasn't that big, so I was like not uncomfortable. Even though it was the summer, I just finished work the week before. I was, so yeah, I didn't feel as pregnant as I really was. So I kept going.
Okay. I think that's also a really good thing to educate people on is like, yeah, with your first, you can be like almost that feeling of invincibility that Aaron talked about in day one. And you're like, yeah, I'm pregnant. It's natural. It's normal. I can do all the things. I got to see all the people before I have a baby. And like, I just finished work. So I have this time period, jam it all in. When really that would have been really hard on your body and perhaps preemptive, like started things too early because your body was tired and needed rest. And it actually just like tipped the scales towards birth instead of being able to rest. That's important for people who are pregnant now is like I don't know what your advice, like, so what would your advice be to yourself if you could go back?
I probably wouldn't have done so much that day. Like I didn't need to see 2 friends.
That's a lot.
39 weeks pregnant with a long drive. Those midwife appointments at the end are like longer appointments. I think I wouldn't have done. I would have done one.
Take it easy.
I would have maybe met with one friend and then scooted home. Yeah. But I was also living with my mom there's other contexts too. I was living with my mom at the time. It wasn't nothing against my mom. But it wasn't the greatest environment for me. My partner was in another country. I was about to have this baby. We were going through other things with my partner. Like he needed a visa to come to the country. And so we were like, they denied the first time, then got it the second time. He's scheduled to come, in a couple on my due date, whatever that means, but and so there was just like I was like escaping as well. But in hindsight, I should have just like maybe just gone and sat out in my mom's backyard and ignored the world, but I didn't, and that's
you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So, okay. So, yeah, I think Rachel's like, thanks for sharing. That's a great note for herself. So she's going to take that into account to take it easy and take it slow and kind of like, I feel like if you can honor that time, like as much as possible, but protecting your energy at the same time. It's like, it's a stand that we do. And even as a doula, like when I work with women, in labor, we do a dance between being active and restful. There's a time and a place for it, right? Like
totally.
You don't know that with your first unless you listen to stories like this and get that education from elsewhere.
Yeah. And I only took 2 weeks off. Like I ended at 2 weeks, like before my my mat leave or whatever. And so 5 years, so maybe we'll start, this is a good segue to go into Jacob's birth. 5 years between births. So with my first, I was turning 31. I was just almost 31 when I had him. So now 5 years later, now I'm a mom, still working full time. Being pregnant that second time around was felt different. Because there was like other things I was managing. 5 years later, had Jacob. Where was I going with this? I was going somewhere. Oh, I did things completely different. So I actually went off work early.
Okay.
So he was supposed to be, his due date was May 19th. Again, whatever due dates are, but that's, the
your time frame. Yeah. That you're working with. Yeah.
I think I ended work beginning of April.
Okay. That's lots of time before.
Good for you. Yeah. So I went off work early, at least 6 weeks early. And I knew I needed that time because um, it was a sick leave. I went off. It was a sick leave. Like that's what it was. So as a woman, you have that ability to combine, like everyone look into it, but combine your sick time and your maternity to, like EI time, because I think it's different. But yeah. Anyways, knew that I need the time. Had another little one, so I took the time off. So which my birth was completely different. It was like night and day.
Yeah, I think that's good to know. And I think you're a corporate girly, so she's very corporate, but you know the stress of that, like when you are working all the time, you're a mom, you have so much on your plate. You've also got this partner in your life. You've also got moms come back into when we give birth, whether we're present with them or not. And so taking that time made a huge difference for you and allowed you to kind of maybe sink into it a little bit more and to honor your body and your needs as you led up to pregnancy. I just wanted to give people context for the chat, and like when I'm typing, I can't see the words that I'm typing because I have so much on the screen. So if I mess up, like
Are
I
you
have been
loving
doing.
someone?
Rachel was saying you took more time off, and I said
Yeah.
that's huge. Well, I meant to say love it, not whatever crazy thing I think. So just ignore that. I'm trying to multitask and do this all on a tiny little screen. Okay, so you took 6 weeks off.
Yes.
You figured it out in the land of the corporate world and took a sick leave. So be creative, do what you need
I
to
work with
do.
my midwives to support that.
Yeah.
And um, there was other mental health stuff happening too in my like personal life, my relationship with my husband. He's also now in the country in Canada. We're married. But it wasn't a great year. Like I got pregnant and then it was a horrendous year with my mom and him, and I was in therapy every Sunday. It was like my church, I called it. I'm going to church, but really we're in therapy. And so there was lots of like, wasn't talking to my mom. She didn't know I was pregnant for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I actually knew I was going to conceive. I wanted to have a second, and I knew I was going to conceive. So that was a conscious sort of, decision. And it was a conscious age gap too. I think that's really important for my story, is that it wasn't because, there was like loss in between or I couldn't get pregnant. It was a conscious age gap. I didn't want to have another child while my partner was it was same dad. And I didn't want to have another one. I didn't want to do it again alone.
Yeah.
So
Good to know and good to think about for folks if you can, like how can you learn from your past experience and take, positive and whatever from it and apply it to, if you can, intentionally to your future and to what your motherhood can look like and feel like. And then even though you consciously made that decision, that year was really hard and it didn't go according to plan.
no, it didn't. But that's okay. It's all good.
Yes.
I did have midwives again for my second, same clinic, just different midwives, because it was 5 years later. Like my midwife wasn't, that I had James with, wasn't there anymore. So they were different midwives, but same clinic. I was now living in Toronto, so there was not really a commute per se. And so my plan was to attempt to have, again, a natural birth, 100% natural birth. I did want to explore having a home birth,
Mm-hmm.
but my partner at the time, my husband, he's from the Dominican. I'll just say it. He's from the Dominican, and so in their culture, fathers don't come into the birth space.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very medicalized. Like, if you looked up their stats, like high cesarean rates. And so he was like, home birth, like what are you talking about? Like, how is that even possible? Are you being serious? I was like, yes, I'm serious. But so he wasn't it wasn't really an open door. And I just was like, okay, I'll in high, like if I was doing that now with a partner, I'd be like, it's not your decision, this is my decision, so butt out, just support me with whatever. But at the time, I it was a battle I didn't want to take on.
Yeah, you had to make choices in that scenario, and that would have been really, really challenging to accomplish. So instead, you just took that option off the table and decided to do a hospital birth again.
Yeah. And he wasn't in the country he didn't make it in time, like, because I had James early, so he wasn't here for James' birth. He was here, I guess, when James was like 5 days old or something. He was here. So he has actually he has 5 children. Like Jacob would have been his 5th, and he had never been to a birth. So this also would have been his first birth, not first child, like not, but but
His
first birth.
experience.
Yeah.
Space.
So I was like, okay, maybe I should take also that kind of happy medium, and sort of compromise and make sure that he's able to support me as well. So.
Yeah, and I think that's a couple things are coming up for me. So like, it's interesting that every woman gets to decide how she wants this to unfold, but that it's a part of it. Like even if our relationship is rocky with our partners or there's underlying stuff, and like sometimes women are telling their birth stories, and like Harley was just sharing hers earlier today, and her partner was amazing, and he was like, she's on this medication and like has all the info and like has got her back, and like not every story is like that, right? So I think it's interesting to think about that we make decisions with our partner's experience in mind as well.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Some women are giving birth like free birthing with nobody, like just me, I don't care what anybody else is doing. But other people are making choices with like, I want this man to also have a birth experience because he has 5 kids and he hasn't been to one yet. So I'm taking that into account, and I'm wondering if you want to now, or maybe you can include it in the next part of your story, but can you talk about when you're like, I was laboring alone and giving solo? Can you talk more about like what that looked like, what that felt like? Because I also think that's kind of unique to your story. And women might find themselves in that scenario, or women who have been in that scenario would resonate, or those of us who have had people in the room would learn a lot from what that looked like and felt like.
So with James, I think I talked about a little bit. I labored alone because I had my mom as my birth support, and she probably wasn't the best. She wasn't the best support, the best person to support me through that. After birth, like she would take the baby and do things, but during birth, like she brought her own. I laugh about it now, but I remember like being on the hospital bed being like, what is she doing? Or she had her own yoga mat, a ball. She like took it and went outside. I could see her outside the hospital doing yoga stretches.
Oh my God.
But
okay.
It's all good. So that's how I labored my first birth. My angel sister did show up. She was actually supposed to be coming to Ontario. She lives in British Columbia. And she did show up just as I was pushing. So that was like also really weird too. She like opened the door, and here I am like legs up. But she helped. She was a good support through that. So that most of that birth I labored alone. But my mom did her best, and that's all we can ask for with people as well. So
she showed up as her true self and did her thing.
Yeah, it's funny in hindsight.
Her needs.
I was like, did you pack your hospital bag yet?
Anyways, I love it.
Okay, so then my second one, yeah, it will actually come up with it in a little bit with Jacob. So I think I was 39 weeks. I was like going on to the 40th week. And the midwife, sort of gave the clear, like, you can, if you wish, you can start doing like natural induction methods, walking, all the things. And she mentioned evening primrose. So I was like, oh, what's this? Okay, let me go get some. So I just got like evening primrose oil, like capsules. And so before bed that night, going to bed that night, I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna try this one. So I took two and I put two in. And the next
Like a
morning
suppository? Like you took it like orally, or did you put them in
I put them in my
Okay.
So, but I cut the top or whatever, like I made it a hole, or I don't know what I did. I don't remember really what I did.
Open the capsule.
Don't recommend this.
Do not take notes on this method.
Yeah, I don't recommend it. Warning. So I woke up that morning around 5 and I felt really wet and I felt contractions and then started shortly out. Like I didn't really know what it was going on. I was like, what? Because that didn't happen in my first, right? And so contraction, and then they started slowly after that, like shortly after that. So I put a call into my midwife just to give her an update. She made some suggestions and she said, call back in an hour, or if the contractions become consistent in 5 minutes apart.
Yeah.
So I like literally hung up with her, and then contractions just started to like intensify really quickly. I should also share that in both pregnancies, I did chiropractor care, but with James, it was just a regular like chiropractor, no specialty or like it wasn't focused on anything.
Yeah.
But with Jacob, I did someone who was trained in the Webster technique.
Okay.
That one is specifically for pregnancies. And it really just helps to get your hips in
alignment,
the best alignment to have the baby come down.
Did they maneuver Jacob at all? Because James was transverse, like sideways. Did that come into play? And did they use, so Webster technique is to like change the position of the baby. Did they do that? Like hands?
Well, she did not, like I've been seeing her from the very beginning of my pregnancy. So she didn't just do Webster. She did other things like ligament stuff. And she just really focused on getting my hips in really good alignment, which I think also helped with the way my labor went as well. Like it had an impact on it.
One of my, like, I think sometimes there are times where I don't know how impactful chiropractic care is. That was a controversial thing to say. But like in a big picture sense, there are some times where I'm like, could be supportive. There's lots of other things you could do to instead.
Yeah.
I had more supportive.
Like practitioner as well. She was originally from Brazil, and so she used some like I think she didn't actually tell me and share with me, but I think she used some traditional
yes
as well that she brought in
like for pregnancy. In the clients that I've seen and in the research that I've done, one of the most important factors I would say is pelvic positioning.
Right.
Like 100%. It will change your labor.
Yeah.
So yeah, and Rachel was asking when you started it. So she was starting to see you before Jacob, I'm guessing, and then specifically with women.
With James, it was when I started to see chiropractor when I was having like hip pain. Maybe it had to be. I wasn't even back yet. I was in another country for that's a whole other story. First 20 weeks of my first pregnancy. That's a topic for a different day. My book's coming out in 2030, so just wait. But with Jacob, it was right away. Like I knew I was pregnant when I knew I was going to have him when I was conceiving him. So, and then I just started looking for specific chiropractor. I forget if I'd been going to that clinic or not before, and then she happened to be there. I can't remember, but I wanted someone who I think I'd heard about Webster.
Yep.
And
Yeah. So it just means she takes care of women prenatally regularly. That's an interest of hers.
Yes.
And sometimes practitioners, I like that, because sometimes practitioners that I know too, they bring like Reiki work in without necessarily sharing that with people, or like witchy things that they just know and do because they're intuitive, energetic women, and they just bring it in. So sometimes you get like a lot of holistic care from these amazing holistic practitioners. And I love that, you know, when people specialize, it makes a big difference. So sounds like it was super.
It also, like midwifery, she also didn't, I saw her like maybe once every 6 weeks or every month. And then as my pregnancy was going on further and further into it, then it was like every other week, and then it was weekly. And then even leading up to, I think I was going like every few days. Like it was important.
Yeah.
But it was really, it was really amazing.
And that commitment is really important. If you want to see, like, if you want to set yourself up for success, you need that level of commitment for preparation, whether it's physical or mental or emotional, spiritual, whatever. That is part of the game changer. You have to stay committed, and you got to go to those appointments for sure. So,
but I was also off work too. So I built that space in that I could be extra committed, because I also had a 5-year-old, like an almost 5-year-old at home. Was, again, story for another day, but I was also like the main, care provider, even though I had a partner. So
like solo parenting, partnered. Yeah. Okay, so take us through. So you started. Okay. So you did the primrose oil, which I'll say, like, you can take medicine in all kinds of ways. So you did the primrose oil.
Primrose oil. So I was like, okay, what are you supposed to do this? I probably Googled it. It was like, okay, I guess it's going up. But Jacob was ready he was ready. So, so it was a very different labor. I think I said that. So then I think they were like getting intensive. They were intensifying. And so because they were so different, I just want to point out too, because it was so different, I also didn't know what to expect. Because in my frame of reference, I only had this like slow labor, not really progressing. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, these are coming like every 5 minutes. Like, what is going on? I just woke up.
Right.
I was maybe in a little bit of a panic too. I was also in a panic because 2 days before my almost 5-year-old, James was sick. He got sick, and we were going into a long weekend. And so I was like, oh my gosh. And it was going to be my husband at the time, Felix, and his adult daughter. And his adult daughter was going to be taken care of if I, went into labor or whatever. So I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go into labor this weekend. It's going to be disastrous. He's going to get really sick and la, la, la. So I was like, I'm just going to take him to his pediatrician and get him checked out, make sure everything's okay. Because he had a fever and he had a really, really sore throat. Took him, he had strep throat. So that was on Thursday, the same day that I decided to take the evening primrose oil. So he got him on his, medication, whatever. But he was home from school when I was this morning, and his sister had already, my stepdaughter had already gone off to work. So I spoke to my midwives a couple times, and then finally at 9:00, so like from 5 to 9, I called her back and said, I'm going to the hospital. So I arrived at labor and delivery. I was this Toronto Sunnybrook at 9:35, and with my husband and my 5-year-old in tow. And like I said, he was diagnosed with strep throat the night before. And this was pre-COVID, pre-pandemic,
Yeah.
everybody.
Right.
So he wasn't at school. So stupidly, I said something. Yeah, exactly. And then they're like, oh, he can't go into he can't go in there. I was like, oh my God. But my midwives, actually, once they arrived, they actually didn't have a problem with him going in, but the hospital wouldn't let him into the labor and deliver, or the labor room. Oh, well, it's both at Sunnybrook. So I arrived at L&D, and they kept asking if they could check me because I guess like my contractions were like close together.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, no, my midwife is on her way. You are not checking me. So they were really nervous. Like I could feel their energy. They were like, I think I could feel them like buzzing around and being like, this woman's going to like deliver here. And I wasn't in a room. Like
you were waiting. You were in the waiting room. Yeah. Waiting for your midwife.
But I continued standing in my power and waited for my midwife, and then she checked me, and I think I was like 4 centimeters dilated. Like I was, it was pretty good.
Yeah, on your way. Yeah, early day. Yeah.
And so we went into the private birthing room. I have like these notes. So basically, I labored in and out of the tub. They have a tub. It was like a private at Sunnybrook. They have really nice. It was brand new at the time. Really private. Like you labor and deliver in the same room. You don't have to switch rooms or anything. And I had to labor alone for a little bit
because Dad had to be with the son.
Yeah, because Felix had to wait in the waiting room until his adult daughter, could come and pick up James. And James was so sad that he couldn't come in, but la la la. So, yeah, I had to labor. By myself again. Here we are going again. And I also, the other thing I did differently too, I told no one that I was in labor. So I didn't tell any of my family. I didn't announce it to Facebook or any like social media at the time. I didn't tell my sister, and she's like one of my closest people. So, and I did that. I just wanted to stay focused. So that was another thing, that I did. I think that actually helped me focus on the birth.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's interesting listening to everybody's story, and like every woman is different. It really depends on what you need to cope. Like some people need those family in the mix. They need to like have told them for various reasons, or they want them to be part of that birth experience. And then there are those of us who don't want them as part of it, and it fucks with our head. So I think it's really good to hear that you were like, no, I need to focus. And so I'm actually not going to share this with anybody. I'm going to protect this work that I've done from, especially since after your first and all the years before up until this point. Like it sounds like you really wanted to protect all the work that you were doing actively in that moment, but that you have already done as well.
Yeah. And like I'm a former people pleaser. So part of that, I know I shared that I was in like therapy that whole year. And so part of that healing through therapy was like, no, actually I get to make decisions. I don't have to tell everyone anything. I don't have to tell anyone anything if I don't want. So it's also me kind of, again, standing in my power to be like, no, I don't want anyone to know. I just want it to be, I was also protecting, like there was some codependency and enmeshment with my mom. And so I was like protecting my own family, trying to like salvage my family unit, husband, my kid, and now this new baby that's coming in. So it was part of that as well.
And it's interesting how like the universe totally was testing you, being like, oh, you're trying to protect that and salvage that? Well, we're not even going to let them in the room.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah.
Do it alone again.
Yeah. But yeah, so the am I going with this now? So my contractions were like really intensifying, and I was like, I need an epidural. I was starting to cave because I was like laboring alone, and my little one is now being like hauled off with his sister, and he's upset, and so I was like starting to not be clearly focused on my plan. But it all worked out because the anesthesiologist couldn't come, anyways. Or I don't even know if they told them, but like my midwives,
right.
I think, yeah.
So what version you were given was that he couldn't come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what we ended up deciding to do was rupture my membranes and continue to labor as I was in and out of the bathtub. And that worked because within, I would say 45 minutes, I was ready to, I was 10 centimeters dilated. So I became like stuck at like 6, like I wasn't progressing. I mean, I was progressing, but I was starting to run out of steam.
Yes. Yeah. So. And feel defeated that like you couldn't have the experience that you wanted, where you're, you know, and that we've been, one of the themes as well is like that push and pull of motherhood, where you have the older child and it's like part of you is with them. Like part of you is like, oh, my boy is sad because he wanted to be here with mommy. And like, he doesn't get to have that. Yeah. So it plays a role in how you're able to move forward in this birth.
Yeah. So I remember, I don't know if I'm supposed to give too much detail or not, but I remember being very hot. Like I was so hot in this birth or in this labor. So hot. I could not. I was like, yeah, it was just so hot. I had no clothes. I was just like, do not give me a blanket. Like, don't give me a sheet. Get anything away from me.
I know that feeling.
They tried to give me the lap, like the nitrous oxide, and I like put it on, and I was like, get that away from me too. I like threw it away. And so eventually Felix got to come back into the, like was back in the room when James was gone. And so, yeah, then I was like, I think I'm ready. Like, I feel like I'm ready. And then she checked me and she's like, yeah, you're ready. So, I think I pushed for 10 minutes maybe. And then Jacob came right side. So amazing. That was at 12:50, I think. Yeah. 12:50 he was born. So from 5 a.m. till 12:50. And then I was discharged and I was home by 5:30. So I literally did a work day, like 9:30 to 5:30. I did a work day.
9 to 5er.
Exactly. I can have a baby in 9 to 5.
Wow. And so different than your first, because it felt like it was a very long, and it was a very long journey in comparison. But I feel like, yeah, that preparation work. So like actually, because you know James was sideways, so her first was sideways, that tells you that he wasn't in the pelvis properly for whatever reason. And this baby was, and he was ready, and like, and then he just came out. And within 10 minutes, I feel like that pushing time is also, depending on how it goes for people, is also indicative of like, of that pelvic positioning being a really big part of easier, more productive labor, shorter. Of easy is the right word.
Even with James, I didn't push that long. It was like 30 minutes. So I don't know if that's like, yeah, I hear horror stories of like 2 hours. I couldn't imagine that, but.
Which, yeah, so there are some people who, I would say for if you haven't had a baby yet, to expect a long time of pushing.
Yeah.
But I would also say don't push until you really feel that overwhelming urge.
And with Jacob, I did. Well, it was different because I had an epidural, but with Jacob, like I was like, yeah, we need this. It's go time. Like I basically said to her, she's like, ready already? I'm like, yeah.
And it's like a freight train, or what are they called? Like you can't stop the moving train. You know what I mean? No. You know that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Undeniable. It's just like it overtakes you. And so until that moment where it's overtaking you, to push would be not futile because it's still doing something, but it's a waste of your resources, really. And like you could be maybe resting, or you could just allow your baby to make those turns. So you were talking about James and the midwives having, or I can't remember who was at the bottom at that point, but people having to turn him a little bit at the end. And
Well,
so
he still
babies
tried to. He was still wanting to. Like he didn't turn because he was already like too far into the birth canal, but you could see him wanting to like go back to that position. Like, and he
yeah.
only turned really at the end. Like it was like a last minute turn.
Yeah, so they describe it as like like a key. A baby is like a key and a lock in our bodies. So like perfectly designed to make like, oh, let me focus. Like all of these little notches kind of represent the movements and the turns that babies do physiologically inside of us to be born. They're called the cardinal movements. And like there are 12 of them, but also when you train as a midwife or a doctor, there's like, I don't even double that or even more little tiny movements that they make, like flexions of their chin or tucks or turns. So when your pelvis isn't aligned properly, then yeah, they get like roadblocked. Like they end up like bonking on the top of your pelvis instead of being able to come down and do all those moves. And that creates swelling, which then their head is bigger, harder to fit into that perfectly designed space. So yeah, all these things impact the birthing experience for you and for baby. And yeah, what I notice consistently is parents who've done that prep work have these quicker, easier, like successful vaginal births across the board. I know you also wanted to talk about your experience postpartum and something that happened with this baby. So do you want to move forward into that?
Yeah. Maybe there's something else too that I want to chat about postpartum, but again, it's the same theme of like continuing to let go of expectations. So if we like kind of compare the two, with James, no milk, none of my milk came in. Like I don't even think I had colostrum, like literally, like I probably did have colostrum, but I had no milk, none.
Yeah.
But I was also there was lots going on postpartum. Again, I wasn't living in my own home. I was living with my mom. My partner wasn't here yet. He was arriving. When he arrived, it wasn't very comfortable with different family members. And so my milk I tried, but it just it didn't come in. So I had to switch. And that was also not part of my vision either. And so I had to switch to, formula. I gave up. I literally gave up because it just, like I would pump and I would do everything I could, taking the herbs and so with Jacob, he latched fine. I breastfed him for, the first few months of his life. So again, completely different. He was a lot. He wanted me a lot, to nurse a lot. Yes. So, but that's not why I ended my journey at 3 months, but I'll get there in a minute. And then the other thing, my postpartum, I was in my own home, like with Jacob now. I had my own house with my husband and my with James. And Felix was really, really supportive postpartum. Like if I should actually send you some pictures of like the breakfast and lunches he would like bring up like to me. I didn't even leave. I don't even think I left. So with James, I was in Niagara Falls like 7 days postpartum.
Oh wow.
Doing touring things postpartum. With Jacob, I didn't leave my room for probably 7 days. Literally, I didn't even think I went downstairs. Everything was like, my food was brought up to me. I said, it was amazing. He made these like, because in the Dominican culture, to like bring in your milk, they make you like this chocolate drink. And so he made that I was like, can you make that multiple times a day? That's really good. So he would make that. So I felt really like cared for and nourished and supported. And it was fantastic. So,
Good job, Felix. I'll give you that, my friend.
if you're tuning in, hello.
That's all you get, okay?
So yes. And then what happened? So, my midwives also were like, they came to the house and, did the thing. And then at 8 days postpartum, I had an accident. So, I was breastfeeding, Jacob, and I he was like such a, like a little like cuddler. And so he just like would scrouch up, and he just was like sitting right there. He's also like, my babies weren't very big, like 7'1", 7'6", like they were under 8 pounds. So they were like really the perfect bundle, like yeah. Anyways, they're all perfect, but they just weren't. I thought I would. So I have my own issues with my self-image. I was like, I'm a big woman, I'm gonna have big babies, but they came out with, at 7 pounds, and I was like, oh, I have small babies. So that's why I'm really saying this. So
yeah.
So I had an accident. I was breastfeeding him, and then we were sitting for a little bit, and then I decided to get up. And when I got up, I felt this, like, I just had a adjustment the day before, and I don't know. I don't think it had anything to do with that really, but I got up, and I had a shooting pain in my down my back and into my, like, down my leg, and I fainted. And so I fainted with the baby in my arms, and I fell into my bed. And then I didn't fall on him, but if you had come onto the scene as per Felix, it looked like I had, like, now I'm like on the baby. So he heard a big bang. He was downstairs making breakfast.
Yeah.
He heard a big bang. He came running up and was like, what happened? What happened? And then I was out, like I was like unconscious. And he like opened my arm, and then the baby was there. So I didn't fall on the baby, but now we have this like accident, and it's like, what do we do? So navigating I'm with midwives. I don't have a doctor. Like, I'm not with a doctor. I'm still under the care of my primary caregiver. Is that what you call them?
Yeah.
No. Primary caregiver is my midwife team, but now it's a medical, like, emergency, potentially an emergency. So called them, and then I forget, it's kind of blurry. I forget if they came to the house and checked out the baby, and then they told me to go to the pediatrician, or if I can't remember, but
he said on the phone.
They could have said on the phone, but I feel like they came though. I think they sent a team over I think they did, or they came after. I can't even remember. It's such a blur. But anyways, we proceeded to go to the pediatrician, and when I arrived at the pediatrician, he was horrendous. This little pediatric doctor, he was horrendous. Just a bedside manner. And so navigating this, like, again, this whole situation was you didn't know what to do, right? Baby was fine. He was drinking. So it wasn't like it was an emergency, but it wasn't, because he's drinking. There was no signs of him in distress or anything like that. So we were just following what the midwife said. Just go see a doctor to get him checked out. So that's what we did. But he was like, why are you here? Basically, he was like, why are you here? You should be at the hospital if you fell with this baby. I was like, okay, well, I'm just following,
advice of my care team. Yeah.
So then we proceed to the sick kids hospital, because we were living in Toronto, and they were amazing. So at first they were going to do an ultrasound, but then they decided to do a CAT scan because he was so little that they couldn't really see anything. So it turns out he did have a fracture, like a very small fracture. And then they again, because he didn't have any symptoms, he wasn't exhibiting anything abnormal. But there was a little bit of I forget what they call it, but like a little bit of a bleed. It didn't go far, but there was a little bit of a fracture and a little bit of a bleed. They kept him in overnight just to observe and make sure he was okay. So we stayed in the hospital for, again, 24 hours. And then we got we got released or whatever. So I still remember the doctor actually coming in, one of the specialists coming in the morning to say, he's like, we're discharging him. He's all good. He's like, don't worry. He's never going to remember this. He's never going to remember this. And I was like, I'm not so sure about that, doc, but okay. And I believe he did, even postpartum. So I'm losing my train of thought, but.
Well, you wanted to talk about letting go of expectations.
Oh, yes. Again. So yeah. So now I have this accident. I'm not okay. I actually have a fractured rib from this whole thing. I have bruises all over my body. I'm feeling like guilty and, sad that this has happened to my little baby. And so breastfeeding was like really, like there was things that I had to let go of because I just had too much going on in my head. I was having like intrusive thoughts, and my midwives referred me to a psychiatrist, and I had to wait for that for like 6 months. But by that time I was better. Like I wasn't as having as many thoughts and stuff. So I did let go of expectations, because I had these expectations that, oh my gosh, my birth went so well. He was breastfeeding fine, but now I have this anxiety because it was actually attached to breastfeeding too. So that's why. So I only breastfed until I was about 3 months. So I had to grieve that I can't do this. I'm not doing this, and give myself that permission to, again, pivot or change sort of course and let go of those expectations so that I had on myself.
Yeah. And did anyone ever share with you why you fainted?
So that happens to me. Like, since I was a little girl, when I get hurt, I do faint.
Interesting.
There's a couple of times that it's happened. Like, in one time I was in church when I was about 6, and I guess I was like chatting or something, and my mom just like kind of patted, like, hit my leg, and I fainted.
Wow.
And then I was cross country skiing in grade 6, I think it was. And I fell on the hill, like, just, again, it's cross country, so it's not on like a big hill, but there was a hill, and I fell going down the hill, and I fainted on the hill.
Wow.
So
yeah. So what I think is, I just wanted to ask that because you had somebody who was taking care of you. So even though he's your ex now, like I said, we'll give him this. He was feeding you, he was bringing you like lactation inducing, like really nutritious, wholesome food. He was bringing it to you. You didn't have to go and get it. Like, it sounds really divine, this picture of postpartum wellness, but these random things can still happen. It's not like you did anything wrong. There were no warning signs. There was no health issues that were present, that it was just this random thing that happened, and totally fucked with your head because of all the feels that come up with, not only are you freshly postpartum, but just like wanting to protect your child, I think, too, and then not being able to in that moment because you went unconscious. It's
I was down for the count.
Yeah, totally out of your control. And I think that's one thing that that you've taught me a lot about, and that I would love for you to share. Like, do you have ideas and ways, because you kind of did it on your own before you got offered that therapist at 6 months postpartum, but like, what would you suggest to people who had these expectations of how these experiences were going to go, and how do you grieve? Because I think that's interesting. Like, how did you grieve that? Because I think a lot of us just stuff down. And what tips, I guess, what advice do you have to like actually let go of shit?
I think feeling the feelings is something that I really have tried to, through different therapy methods and people, is just allow myself to feel whatever feelings coming up. I also give myself permission that I don't have